Crymachina is a futuristic action RPG where girls must fight to survive. It's a game where strategic battles and character development are mixed with a deep narrative about the fate of man and machines. This game is available for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation and Steam, and for those who want to download it through Nintendo's eShop, it can be done for $60. A couple of physical versions are available, for example a limited version and a deluxe version. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, I review new games every week. So this is basically a pretty heavy story about how humanity managed to wipe itself out. We get to meet a couple of cyborg-like individuals who survived by going into space and leaving humanity behind. In particular, we get to know an individual named Leben, who wakes up 2000 years after her death, without really having a clue of what is going on. Why is she in space? Why is she a machine? And what is going on around her? But the fact is that she is considered exceptional and needed to restore humanity. So the first things I have to say about this narrative is that it's pretty convoluted. Certainly the plot is quite simple in itself, but afterwards it becomes very deep. It branches out, new characters are introduced who all have their own way into the story, and it strikes me I would have to play through the game twice to fully understand what this is about from all its perspectives. Sometimes we get to experience historical flashbacks, sometimes we get descriptions of the various characters' intentions, and this is mixed up with lots of relationship drama, so it's quite difficult to sort out the tone. It may seem dystopian and dramatic, but the relationships between the game's protagonists are both light-hearted and loving. I can really recommend going into the menu and reading thoroughly about all the characters. In this way, it becomes easier to understand everyone's role in the story and how they fit in. And I have to say that the character menu is a useful tool, especially if you forgot a name or want to know something about someone in particular. Linguistically, there are also a number of terms that can be good to remember. These are words that keep coming back and are exclusive to the game itself. For example, terms like EVE, EXP, Cherubim and Eden. These are words that are constantly recurring, and if you have an idea of their meaning, it will also be easier to follow along in the game's narrative. But since there is a plethora of different terms, there is a relevance to go back to the game's archives and read up on what they all means. In my opinion, a good frame rate is generally important when playing an ARPG. If the frame rate is failing, it can affect the battles to the point that the game risks becoming unplayable or unsatisfying. In Crymachina you can expect a fast pace, where the enemy puts your reaction skills to the test. And a few weeks ago I ran a frame rate test in another game published by NIS America, namely Nayuta. A game that is really solid, and like Nayuta, Crymachina delivers. We are talking about 30 FPS and the gameplay feels both smooth and responsive. I don't know what it is, but it's my experience that games published by NIS America tend to be very stable. And the same goes for Crymachina. Even though there is a lot happening at the same time with all the animations and visual effects, I can still move smoothly and unhindered due to the good performance of the game. The gameplay can be seen as a combination of fast-paced combat and interactions between the game's protagonists, mainly. In fact, part of the game takes place in something called a tea party. Here, the game's characters discuss various internal dilemmas and how they perceive the world they are in. Once you have heard what they have to say, you can enter the three-dimensional world and fight against the game's enemies. The stages are usually relatively short, where you only fight a couple of enemies before a boss awaits. And broadly speaking, this is how the game is structured. Tea party and then fight, tea party and fight. But of course there are nuances in most things. Many stages can contain easier puzzles or gauntlets where you have to avoid various dangers. Here you are chased by a giant whale while you have to jump over obstacles. And on this stage you have to jump on different boxes to avoid getting hurt by the red laser. Sometimes you also have to jump between platforms to reach the next checkpoint. I wouldn't say it's particularly challenging, but it does offer some variety. Something that can be significantly more difficult are the battles themselves. This is because they are designed in a way that may require knowledge about enemy behavior, particularly the game's bosses. You run the risk of dying if you just attack without considering what the enemy can do, and the bosses can do massive damage if you are not careful, regardless of difficulty. And there are two difficulty levels, casual and normal. I tested both, and have to say that even if you notice a clear difference in difficulty, you still have to be careful. But I think the most fun is playing on normal. This is where I experienced the real nerve, when the boss is dying and your health pool is low. That's when my heart starts pumping and I know it could go either way, win or lose. And the bosses are, in my opinion, the game's great asset, which is due to their design and the fact that most of them are unique. Something that should also be highlighted is the control. I've played 3 of the game's characters, all of whom have different strengths. Both Leden and Mikoto use fast melee attacks, while Amy has a slower swing. In addition to this, there is a plethora of different ranged attacks that are interchangeable at will. The characters can also run, jump and dash, but the basic pace is high. Watch here as I move from left to right. This is the normal running speed, and with that said, the control is incredibly responsive. You can also lock onto the enemy, which makes it easier as you don't have to rotate the camera and can instead focus completely on what needs to be done. The battles are generally entertaining, a lot depending on a smooth and easy to use control. Since character development is an essential part of this game, there are of course several systems that can boost the protagonists. Of course you can level up your characters, but also spend points that affect how resilient you will be in battle. In addition, there is a support program where you can, for example, strengthen your healing abilities. It's also possible to obtain different weapons and armor. You will probably find quite a few items, and this can lead to a certain amount of experimentation. You can destroy obsolete weapons to obtain currency, but sometimes you can have weapons that are about as strong, so then it may rather about priorities. But overall, I would like to point out that all the systems and the menu are easy to manage and navigate. Crymachina is an SRPG that I think can appeal to all those who appreciate a well-balanced mix of RP and fast-paced action. But despite the fact that the game is generally presented in a solid way, there are also occasional question marks. What I consider to be one of the problems is the narrative, which is somewhat convoluted. The basic story is coherently designed, but becomes increasingly complex later on. And as I said before, I would have to play through the game twice to get a proper picture of all the characters, their individual fates, and what role they play in the story, both from a time perspective but also in terms of their intentions and motives. But if there are any things I want to emphasize, it's the control, the battles, and especially the bosses. It is very easy to control the playable character, which means that I can focus 100% on the gameplay, for example on how to deal with difficult opponents. I would also like to add that the game maintains a high performance, both when it comes to the frame rate and the fact that I still haven't experienced any crashes. This is a solid game, whether you choose to play handheld or docked, and the price, $60 for a digital download. You really get a lot of game for your money, and if you are a fan of SRPGs, I guess it might be worth it. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. I review new games every week. Have a nice day. See ya!